Chris Chadbourne from Ventax. I was a senior tax inspector in the revenue, left in 1984. I've been a partner on tax investigations in 2 top 10 firms, and I've been an independent tax consultant for the last 7 years. HMRC place a great deal of reliance on opening meetings and investigations. It's often critical to the way the inquiry goes, and you need to be sure of a lot of key points before you advise your client that it's the sensible thing to do, because very often it's not. Meetings at the beginning of the inquiry, generally I'd say not a good idea. Certainly a very bad idea if you don't know where the taxman's coming from. You need to get it across that you're not sure why the inquiry's been undertaken, what the risk areas are, that it's appropriate, that you're being cooperative, you're more than happy to address any questions in writing, and will do so in a reasonable timescale. If the inspector is insistent that a meeting is the only way forward, then he or she's got to be very specific as to why they think that, because clearly it would be unusual to have a situation where a meeting is the only way forward. And I can't think of too many instances where actually conducting the early stages of an inquiry, getting the basic facts down, why that of necessity means a meeting. I've come across a few cases where accountants have said to the client that I suppose they take the view that the investigations are fairly routine. It's going to mean me travelling 60 miles up the road. I'm quite happy for you to see an inspector on your own, and that really is professional negligence of the highest order. That first meeting is absolutely critical, and there's no way I'd ever let a client go do an opening meeting on their own. If you're going to do the best job for your client, then it's absolutely critical that you are aware of where the inspector's coming from, the key issues, that you're recognising before a question has been asked pretty much what the strengths and weaknesses are. You're aware of the standard sort of questions that are going to be asked. Your client's aware where the meeting's going to go. There's nothing better than at the end of the meeting where somebody says to you, well, that went exactly how you predicted, Chris. They're always supposed to provide you with an agenda beforehand so that you and the client can actually do the necessary research. I think experience tells you that generally the new collaborative approach may see some changes here, but certainly they're not that noticeable at the moment on most cases. But those agendas will be fairly general. I want to talk to your client about the records he keeps. I want to talk to him about the business. I want to talk to her about their private expenditure. And very often you'll be talking about an agenda with just 4 or 5 bullet points. Well, okay, well, you want to talk about the records? Well, you've already seen the records. What exactly is it you want to know? You want to talk about the business? Well, if you look on our website, you'll see a lot of information now. What do you want to know? You want to talk about our private assets, our lifestyle? Well, why do you want to do that? What do you want to know exactly? If you're not getting a meaningful agenda with some give by the inspector, then in my view you're as well off dealing with the issue by correspondence. The good inspector will always try and pin the position down. So a lot of detailed questions about what happens to the cash, how often is it banked, what's the system when business expenses are paid for in cash, how and when a cash drawing is recorded, cash on hand, is there a safe in the business, is there a safe at home, what's kept in the safe at home, etc, etc, etc. the taxman is always keen to be as clear as possible on what's happening with the cash, and the inspector will recognise that if cash is understated, then there'll be significant cash expenses somewhere, and we'll ask questions like what sort of things do you spend your cash on? What, for example, is the most cash you've ever spent on anything? Have there been any windfalls or legacies, or do you bet? And they're the questions in relation to monies coming in that may not be taxable, where again clients will use these as explanations to say, oh yeah, well all this money that's got in my private bank account was from my dying granny. They'll try and preempt all that sort of stuff by asking some quite general and some quite specific questions. So if a client says, yeah, I do bet, I go to the horse racing, probably once a month, and go to the dogs a couple of times a month, probably should get from a good inspector a lot of questions about how the betting operates as far as the client's concerned, the sort of winnings, the sorts of losses, etc., etc. So as things develop, at least the inspector's got a clear vision of what the taxpayer says, and being able to match that up with all the information that they will eventually obtain through private bank accounts. HMRC's instructions to inspectors are to say that they should invariably be held at the business. Some good reasons for that as far as they're concerned. If certain things crop up about the records, or it's felt that they need some verification of something, then you can go into the office next door and actually get the bits of paper, which may be a good reason not to go down that route anyway. Another is that give the inspector an inch and they take a mile, and we'll often try and do a bit of snooping around there, talk to people perhaps they shouldn't be talking to, etc. There's also, as far as the business is concerned, do you really want invariably at least 2 inspectors waltzing around with their briefcase with ER on them? Do staff, do customers, do clients want to know that you've got a meeting with a taxman? Typically not. At one time, they would occasionally ask to go to the taxpayer's home. That's much rarer these days, and unless it actually suits you. For example, aged, disabled clients or whatever, if it actually suits you to go to their home, then that's fine, but it's very unusual now. Usually I think it's sensible to go to the accounts office. It's probably somewhere where the taxpayer's comfortable and the inspector less comfortable. Inspector's office, probably the last resort. Inspectors will invariably operate in pairs. One inspector will write the notes up and the other will basically conduct the meeting. As far as you recording the meeting is concerned, HMRC's response will be unusual requests, but yeah, that's okay with us, as long as we get a typed up copy in due course at your expense. This idea of the black, the white and the grey, that if something's black, then get it admitted, get it on the table, sort it out. If something's grey, then let's get the facts as best we can, let's argue it. If it's white, then demonstrate it's not a problem. There are certain things that are a problem that you're going to have to disclose at some point in time. Do it, and have those sorts of things clear in your own minds before you go ahead. You should have a very detailed knowledge of what your strengths and weaknesses are and how you're going to play them. It's up to the inspector, I think, to summarise where we're at. Okay, this is why we wanted the meeting. This is what we've dealt with. You've agreed to do A, B and C, Mr. Accountant. and I've agreed as the inspector to deal with these several issues as well, and trying to put some sort of time frame on things, just letting everybody know where we stand and where we're going next. Lifestyle questionnaires are handed out by the taxman on a fairly regular basis. Okay, what they're after is what sort of money are they spending, how are they spending it, what's paid, particularly in cash, what's being covered in cash. If somebody was to ask me what I spent on anything 2 years ago, the only way you can really do that is to look at your check stubs, look at your bank statements, look at your credit card statements. As far as cash, it's really what's left, and the sort of general questioning of cash shouldn't be along the lines of what do you spend on beer or cigarettes or whatever it is, but what items of expenditure are covered with cash, and you're reconciling the credit cards, you're reconciling the bank accounts with the private side, with the private expenses, and saying, well, cash must be spent on these sorts of items, and in the past 2 months, 3 months or whatever, my client's been keeping a log and this is what it is. I mean, that sort of approach gives you an infinitely better feel for what's being spent and where it's being spent than any lifestyle questionnaire, which personally I would never, rarely use the word never, but I think it's fair to say I would never advise a client to complete one of those things. Now, in all serious fraud cases, the client will be asked to do an investigation report, a disclosure report, and that's basically when HMRC have challenged the taxpayer that they believe there's serious fraud involved in this particular case, that the client has acknowledged there's a tax problem. HMRC then basically say, well, we want to move this forward with you basically spending a few months putting everything together. You've outlined the sort of problems, we want chapter and verse, and it's something that I think can be usefully used by accountants on a regular basis, where it's clear there's a problem, it's acknowledged there's a problem, and particularly where inspectors are proving difficult, either they're inexperienced or they're looking to dot I's and cross T's, dealing with far too much detail rather than just getting the job done, is to basically take ownership and say, right, we acknowledge there's a problem, we'll look into these matters and get those matters that need looking into actually agreed with the inspector, and we'll come back to you in 2 months, 4 months, or whatever seems reasonable. Inspectors typically don't ask for that sort of thing, but certainly welcome it when it's offered, and is going to do you absolutely no harm whatsoever when it comes to looking at penalties for cooperation and disclosure and the like. The big advantage is it gets the inspector off your back. It enables you to question your client properly, to deal with matters, put the right sort of spin on them in the report, put the best polish on it you can. It's something that a lot of accountants don't do, but I think can pay dividends in a lot of instances. So if there's, if it's obvious there's 10, 20 grand tax lost, if it's obvious there's some issues that you can usefully bottom out without the inspector doing all the work and all the questioning, I think it's often easy, particularly if the client's had a rough ride so far, to actually get the taxman out of the way for a few months and get the whole thing sorted with you and the client actually in the driving seat.